myself in a terrible position as the sole conduit between the underworld and the United States government.
The government told Giancana some of its deepest secrets. Miami seethed with intrigue. The CIA was planning to invade Cuba with an army of Cuban exiles. It persuaded Castro's former mistress to go back to Cuba and slip poison pills into his drink. But once in Cuba, she lost her nerve. The CIA's invasion of Cuba failed too. Fearing exposure of America's involvement, at the last minute, President Kennedy called off the U.S. air cover the invaders had been promised. They were arrested or shot. The mafia chiefs, like the defeated Cuban invaders, were infuriated by Kennedy's empty promises.
I can assure you that this flag will be returned to this brigade in a free Havana.
Kennedy blamed the CIA for the failure. The CIA and the mafia blamed him. Sam Giancana was bitterest of all. In his worst nightmares, he never expected Bobby Kennedy to be made Attorney General. Instead of thanking him, Kennedy was furious the CIA had used a gangster in a secret operation. Far from going easy on organized crime, he set out to destroy it. This was a disaster for Giancana. The criminal career of Sam Giancana was faltering.
I said, take a look at this guy, this scum, this piece of slime. This is Sam Giancana, the boss of the Chicago mob, the successor to Al Capone. Just look at this jerk. You people are so lucky. You just are traveling through Chicago. We have to live with this slime. Well, nobody had ever talked to Sam Giancana like that. And as a result, he just blew his stack and he said, Romer, he said, you lit a fire tonight that's never going to go out. We're going to get you if it's the last thing we ever do.
Giancana had suffered the most extraordinary reverse. He'd been involved in a deep government secret. He thought he had the Kennedys in his pocket. In fact, he was running from them like a rat. Many racketeers now smoldered with hatred for the Kennedys. Giancana himself, his union friend Jimmy Hoffa, his co-conspirator in the Castro plot Santo Trafficante, all had been targeted by Bobby Kennedy for prosecution.
But 3 quick shots shattered this day, November 22nd, 1963.
Sam Giancana told my father that we took care of Kennedy together, that elements of the CIA, along with members of the mob, joined together to assassinate the President of the United States, that they each had equal reason to make sure that Kennedy did no longer remain in office. Specifically, that Kennedy was upset at the CIA, and obviously the mob was very upset at Kennedy.
Wishful thinking, maybe, but at least one official inquiry, that of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, did conclude there probably was a conspiracy, perhaps headed by a powerful ally of Giancana, the mafia boss of New Orleans, Carlos Marcello.
If there was a plot, and I think there was, the most plausible explanation of the evidence is that organized crime, in particular, Marcello in New Orleans, had a hand in the assassination.
The evidence connecting the mafia to the assassination was circumstantial, but intriguing. 2 days before Kennedy was shot, a New Orleans bar girl was admitted to a hospital where she made startling claims to doctors.
She said it was very common knowledge in the underworld figures in New Orleans that there was a contract out on John F. Kennedy and that he would be assassinated. She gave no specifics, But she made it very clear, and she told a number of the staff in the hospital there that this was going to happen before it happened.
She worked in a bar in New Orleans owned by the family of Carlos Marcello, the city's mafia chief, and a longtime associate of Sam Giancana. In mid-1963, on his huge private estate in the swamps outside New Orleans, Marcello told several witnesses the mob intended to kill the president.
I'm thinking, well, here's a vendetta where he is like going to kill somebody. And so I'm saying, you're not, how are you going to do that? You can't do a thing like this. And he says, you get a nut to do it for you.
He said that?
Yeah.
You get a nut?
You just get a nut to do it. Nobody bothers you. You just get a nut to do it.
Was Lee Harvey Oswald the mafia's nut? It's Patsy? The House Select Committee heard that the man who raised Oswald, his uncle, worked for Marcello. They also heard Santo Trafficante told an associate, the president will be hit. The House Select Committee thought the background of Jack Ruby had never been properly investigated by the Warren Commission. In fact, Ruby was linked with the Chicago Mafia.
The motion is slowed.
I think that Jack Ruby is the Rosetta Stone for the assassination. And once you connect Ruby immediately to organized crime, do you then turn back and say, can I connect Oswald to organized crime? And the answer is yes.
Just before the assassination, Ruby phoned mobsters all over the country, including men close to Giancana.
The President of the United States is dead.
All Giancana was heard to say by an FBI bug was that Lee Harvey Oswald had been a very good shot.
He got what he deserved, as far as he was concerned.
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
From jail in Dallas, Ruby appealed over and over again to be moved to Washington. He had something important to say and didn't feel safe in Texas. But the Warren Commission ignored his pleas. Many years later, mobster Santo Trafficante, upon learning he was dying, allegedly made a confession to his lawyer.
They said to me, he says, Carlos really effed up. I said, we should have killed Bobby instead of Giovanni, meaning they should have killed Bobby Kennedy instead of John Kennedy. Santa would withhold information from me. But in the 27 years that I represented him, and he was a friend of mine, I've never known him to lie to me. He would never lie.
Regardless, Robert Kennedy was haunted by the fear his war on organized crime provoked his brother's murder.
If the mob was not involved in the assassination, they were nevertheless the chief beneficiaries of it. The organized crime program that had not up until that time even come close to what he put together basically collapsed. The organized crime program died in Dallas on November the 22nd.
If he did flirt with the mob, Joe Kennedy had unlocked the darkest forces imaginable. The criminal career of Sam Giancana was threatened. Mobsters thought his affair with Phyllis McGuire attracted too much heat, but he refused to relinquish her.
The mob thought he was a weakling because he getting so much publicity. I mean, here he is with the star.
No comment. I'm sorry. No comment.
And everywhere they went, photographers are waiting, and along with the photographers were the FBI, and the FBI would grab her and try to question her. The mob had no faith. They have no faith in women. They figured they're going to be tortured and scream. But she stood up to it all. But the mob didn't. They were very upset with it.
Jailed for contempt of court, Giancana seemed suddenly old, even vulnerable. In 1966, he was released and slipped into exile in Mexico. taking with him millions of dollars. He chose a town in the mountains above Mexico City, with blue skies and clouds of bougainvillea. Large payments were certainly made to powerful men in Mexico City to protect him, to provide sanctuary. He bought a $5 million estate called San Cristobal and shut himself away at the top of the house.
He could sit there for hours and hours and hours and just look out and never budge.
He would have telescopes in his upper room and looking out and seeing the poverty, and not only that, he used the telescope to see if there were any government people looking in onto his home.
He'd often said the time a man has to watch out is when he becomes frail and lets his guard down.
The mob is an organism. It's a growing organism. And if you're not there to water the plants or take care of the plants, somebody else is going to do that. And pretty soon they figure he's unstable, and they're watching all the time. I mean, I don't care where he was, somebody was watching Sam.
Perhaps he hadn't paid the Mexicans enough. One morning in 1974, when he was tending his cactus garden, Mexican police raided his estate and dragged him to the U.S. border.
Mr. Cannon, why did you have to leave Mexico, sir?
Why? I don't know.
I finally thought, well, you know, he'll come back and we'll be a family. But
Mr. Jim Cannon, what are your future plans here?
In 1975, he was called before a Senate committee investigating the CIA plot to kill Castro. The night of June 19th, 2 escorts had just arrived in Chicago to take him safely to Washington. Neither his caretaker nor police officers watching his house heard the 6 shots that killed Sam Giancana at midnight on June the 19th, 1975. He'd been cooking sausages and late that evening opened the door to a visitor. A few minutes later, he was dead, shot in the head and the chin. Perhaps somebody believed he would blurt out the truth about the Castro operation at the hearings in Washington. Not long afterwards, the dismembered body of Johnny Rosselli, Giancana's partner in the Castro murder plot, was found stuffed in an oil drum in the sea off Miami. Giancana always said that if you want to find the murderer, look for the one who survives. The mob's only survivor from the plot to kill Castro was Santo Trafficante, the mafia chief of Florida.
They were afraid he was going to talk, the same as Rosselli. Rosselli's going around shooting his mouth off, and they were killed within months of each other. I think it was the Trafficante people got the okay from Chicago.
Like so many who live in a world of secrets, Giancana, perhaps in the end, understood less about the world than he thought he did. Finally, his darkest dreams of real political power came to nothing. His funeral was an oddly muted affair. The mobsters who once fawned on Giancana stayed away. His family was bitter.
They really practically beat up on me. The press. Can't we mourn in peace without having